My bill would put an end to this madness.
You recently introduced legislation called the Stop Arming Terrorists Act. My first question is, why is that necessary? Is that not already illegal?
That's what most people think. Most people are under the impression that if you or I or anyone that we know provided support of any kind to a terrorist person or an organization like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, we'd be thrown in jail. What most people are surprised to learn is that for years our government has quietly been providing both direct and indirect support, whether it's arms, funds, intelligence, and other types of support to these militant groups who are working directly alongside, allied with, and under the command of terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Our government has also been providing this support indirectly through countries like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Qatar, who are supporting these terrorist groups, all with this objective of conducting regime change in Syria.
So here's Tulsi Gabbard come on and say, hey, this is all crazy. Listen to what she says.
An investigation for these horrific chemical weapons attacks. I'll be the first one to denounce him, but the key is now with President Trump's reckless military strikes last night. It flew directly in the face of the action that the UN was working on at that time to launch an independent investigation, to find out exactly what the facts are, who was involved and who was responsible.
So that seems pretty sober. That seems like, oh, thank God a grown-up came into the room and she said, hey, let the UN do their investigation. Let's find out what the facts are before we, I don't know, start a war.
Guys, Howard, how do you respond to Tulsi Gabbard?
I think it's outrageous. There's a long, well-known history, both in our Intelligence Committee, Amnesty International, Doctors Without Borders. Every single one of these agencies has said that Assad is using chemical weapons.
CNN has obtained videos that were shown on Thursday to members of the Senate Intelligence Committee in a classified briefing. These videos that the senators were shown were presented to the senators by the intelligence community as having been verified as authentic by the intelligence community. They show the victims of a chemical weapons attack, and according to intelligence officials, it is specifically a sarin gas attack. CNN cannot independently verify the authenticity of these videos. We're reporting on them because we have verified that the Obama administration is showing them to members of Congress as they hope to build a case to support military strikes against the Assad regime. We're going to show you the videos right now, walking you through them very quickly. I want to first caution viewers that some of the images in these videos, in fact, all of the images in these videos, are disturbing. But we are showing them to you because the nation is about to make a very momentous decision. We have seen a lot of video out there of alleged barbarity by Syrian rebels. This is also part of the debate, what is being shown to members of the Senate intelligence community. So here is video number 1 of the 13. It was shot, filmed on the date of the chemical weapons attack, the intelligence community says, in Jabbar, which is outside Damascus in Syria. It focuses on a little boy, maybe 8 years old, in a room full of what appear to be dead and dying Syrians. We'll go to video 2 now. This video is about 1 minute 20 seconds long. It was shot in eastern Ghouta. It shows a man, if we can go to video 2, it shows a man having a chemical reaction. This is, I'm still looking at, there he is. Obviously, more evidence as to why the Obama administration feels that chemical weapons are weapons beyond the pale and why military intervention is needed. I want to play
During our investigation for crimes against humanity and war crimes, we collect some witness testimony that that made to appear that some chemical weapons were used, in particular nervine gas. And what appeared on, to our investigation that was used by the opponents, by the rebels. And we have no indication at all that the government, Syria, the authority of the Syria government have used chemical weapons.
US President Barack Obama is facing an uphill struggle to convince Congress to back military strikes against Syria in response to last month's alleged chemical weapons attack near Damascus. His aides have launched a political offensive in the run-up to next week's debate as numerous lawmakers have begun voicing concerns. Meanwhile, in Cairo, a meeting of the Arab League has highlighted divisions among its members. Saudi Arabia said condemning Syria over the poison gas attack, which the US claims killed over 1,000 people, was not enough. However, Egypt remained opposed to foreign military intervention. Their final resolution urged the international community to take action against Syria.
Every day that goes by, we see the results of the regime by Assad in partnership with the Iranians on the ground, the Russians in the air. Russia hasn't paid any attention to ISIS. They're interested in keeping Assad in power. So when I was Secretary of State, advocated, and I advocate today, a no-fly zone and safe zone. Leverage with the Russians because they're not going to come to the negotiating table for a diplomatic resolution unless there is some leverage over them. Russia has decided that it's all in Syria.
The Clinton Foundation has confirmed it accepted a $1 million gift from Qatar while Hillary Clinton was U.S. Secretary of State. The foundation didn't inform the State Department, even though Clinton had promised to let the agency review new or significantly increased support from foreign governments. In an email released by WikiLeaks, the money from Qatar was a gift to mark Bill Clinton's 65th birthday.
Former President Bill Clinton's foundation has raised tens of millions of dollars from foreign governments that his wife Hillary Clinton may find herself negotiating with on behalf of the United States should she become Secretary of State. A list of donors just released by the Clinton Foundation includes a who's who of international business and billionaires. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia gave at least $10 million to the William J. Clinton Foundation.
Hey, we talked about why we're in Syria. You ever wonder why we're in Syria? It's there because we're trying to help people. I'm here with Robert Yesamura, Hank Thompson. We're going to talk about Syria. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he wrote an article. We covered some of it that appeared in the Politico. This is also over at Echo Watch, which is even of a longer version of that story. And there's some stuff that we left out I want to talk about. So what are we doing in Syria, right? So what America doesn't know is that the CIA, at our behest, has been toppling governments in the Mideast left and right, trying to all the time since the 40s. This is true. Iran, Syria, Jordan, Afghanistan, all of them. We've been had our fingers in. We want to control it. And Robert Kennedy says, while the compliant American press parrots the narrative that our military support for the Syrian insurgency is purely humanitarian, many Syrians see the present crisis as just another proxy war over pipelines and geopolitics. What? A pipeline? I've never once heard Rachel Maddow or Brian Williams mention a pipeline. And that's why we're in Syria. Did you ever hear that, Hank? You ever hear anybody mention that, a pipeline?
No, not a lot of pipeline talk on Brian
about
Williams.
What we're doing in Syria? No. How about you, Rob? You ever hear them talk about a pipeline?
I haven't heard them talk about anything in terms of Syria that explain what the hell's going on.
No, it's just that there's Assad
they just say
bad,
Assad is bad,
and ISIS cuts
is
people's
bad,
heads off,
and Russia's there, and they're
Russia's
bad.
there,
like,
and we're going to fix it.
Mosul.
And Mosul.
A lot of people think the Syrian war started in 2011 with the Arab Spring, but instead it really began in 2000. Was it Ralph Nader? No. It was when Qatar proposed to construct a $10 billion, 1,500-kilometer pipeline through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, and Turkey. And here's the pipeline that he's talking about, by the way. So look at this. So here's the pipeline starting at Qatar. So this is by the way, this is natural gas. Right. So Saudi Arabia and Iran, they have the largest natural gas deposit in the world, and so Qatar wants to take it through Jordan. See, we go Saudi Arabia, Jordan, through Syria, through Turkey. So they're on board. Jordan's on board. Turkey's on board. Guess who's not on board? Syria. And there's the problem. So now here's the other pipeline. Comes from Iran. These are the competing pipelines. Shia, Sunni. Okay? Just so you know. And Russia is against this one. They don't want this one. Russia is against it because Russia gives a lot. They're in bed
well, actually,
with Iran.
Russia doesn't want either.
Right. But if they were going to have one, the Russians would lead. Well, let's get into it. Because Robert Kennedy says, of course, the Russians who sell 70% of their gas exports to Europe viewed the Qatar-Turkey pipeline as an existential threat.
Russia has decided that it's all in Syria.
This is to your point, Robert. In Putin's view, the Qatar pipeline is a NATO plot to change the status quo, deprive Russia of its only foothold in the Middle East, strangle the Russian economy, and end Russian leverage in the European energy market. That this whole Syria thing is not as it appears. Do you think we want to go into Syria because he gasses people? Then why did we want to go into Syria in 2005? What? We wanted to go in Syria in 2005? Yeah. Here's Christine Amanpour from CNN interviewing Bashar al-Assad in 2005. Listen to what she has to say in 2005.
You know, the rhetoric of regime change is headed towards you from the United States. They are actively looking for a new Syrian leader. They're granting visas and visits to Syrian opposition politicians. They're talking about isolating you diplomatically and perhaps a coup d'etat or your regime crumbling. What are you thinking about that?
That was 2005. What was the reason back then? But did he gas people back then too? Was that too close to the Iraq war? So we... Well, they never tell you this stuff. Like, I mean, you have to seek this information out. It's out there, but you have to... They never say it like... so it gets into the consciousness of the American people. They don't ever do that. In 2009, Assad announced that he would refuse to sign the agreement to allow the pipeline to run through Syria to protect the interests of our Russian ally. What happened then when he tells the United States and Saudi Arabia that I'm not going to let you have your pipeline? What do you think happened? Well... At that very moment that Assad rejected the pipeline, military and intelligence planners quickly arrived at a consensus that fomenting a Sunni uprising in Syria would be a good thing. At that very moment, they decided to, hey, let's overthrow this guy. According to Sy Hersh, before the war started, Assad was moving to liberalize the country. Yeah, so they weren't going towards theocracy or fundamentalism. Syria was actually, again, the way Iran was before we messed it up, a secular democracy, right? So he was moving that way. According to him, he said they had internet and newspapers and ATM machines, and Assad wanted to move toward the West. After 9/11, get this, Robert, Assad gave thousands of invaluable files to the CIA on jihadist radicals, who he considered a mutual enemy.
Who he still does.
Yes, he does. We consider ISIS an enemy. So does Assad. Except we consider Assad an enemy too. I say bomb them both, which is what we're doing. All right, ready? On September 4th, get this, Robert. On September 4th, 2013, Secretary of State John Kerry told a congressional hearing that the Sunni kingdoms, meaning like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, had offered to foot the bill for a U.S. invasion of Syria to oust Assad. This is in 2013. Kerry told a congressional hearing. I never heard this reported. Did you hear this reported? He said, in fact, some of them, this is according to Kerry,
is about this president's red line. Now, some people in a few places, amazingly, against all the evidence, have questioned whether or not this assault on conscience actually took place. And I repeat again here today, unequivocally, only the most willful desire to avoid reality, only the most devious political purpose could assert that this did not occur as described, or that the regime did not do it.
Here's an article from February 13th of 2018 in the Telegraph newspaper printed in the United Kingdom. Macron, France will strike if the use of chemical weapons is proven in Syria. And this is in response to a chlorine gas attack that happened in February of 2018. It's interesting to note that French President Macron said Tuesday that France will strike if chemical weapons are used against civilians in the Syrian conflict in violation of international treaties. But he had not yet seen proof this was the case. So it's interesting to interpret his words here. So this is 5 years after the CIA and our intelligence agencies were telling U.S. House and Senate members, and our media was telling us that Assad had used chemical weapons on his own people. And President Macron here, 5 years later, in a speech said France is willing to act unilaterally and attack Assad if it's proven he's using chemical weapons on his own people. Yet he says in the same speech he's not yet seen proof that this was the case. John Kerry testified in 2013 that there's absolute evidence Assad gassed his own people. When President Trump took office in 2017, he famously launched a cruise missile attack against Syria.
Detail, we see these beautiful pictures at night from the decks of these two U.S. Navy vessels in the eastern Mediterranean. I am tempted to quote the great Leonard Cohen, "I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons."
In response to a gas attack, which the media said was done by President Assad against his own people. Yet, interestingly, February 8th of 2018, Secretary of Defense Mattis, Trump's defense secretary, admits there was no evidence Assad used poison gas on his own people. So here we have two different world leaders, USA Secretary of Defense Mattis and French President Macron, both admitting in the press, well, we have no evidence Assad's used gas on his own people. And Macron says, but if he does it again, then we'll act unilaterally to disarm him.
After all has been said and done, if we don't now, knowing that he's already done this at least 11 times that our intelligence community can prove, and here in this grotesque, larger event, larger than anything that's happened before, if we back down, if the world backs down, we have sent an unmistakable message of permissiveness.
Refusal to act in Syria after the president has set such a clear red line will be seen as a green light by the Iranian regime, who will see that we don't have the will to back up our words. So, gentlemen, what about boots on the ground? The Arab League, are they going to pony up?
With respect to Arab countries offering to bear cost and to assist, the answer is profoundly yes, they have. That offer is on the table. With respect to boots on the ground, profoundly no. There will be no boots on the ground. The President has said that again and again, and there is nothing in this authorization that should contemplate it. We reiterate, no boots on the ground.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And the details on the offer and the proposal on the table, what are the figures that we're talking about?
Well, we don't know what action we're engaged in right now, but they've been quite significant. I mean, very significant. In fact, some of them have said that if the United States is prepared to go do the whole thing the way we've done it previously in other places, they'll carry that cost. That's how dedicated they are to this.
In fact, some of them had said that if some of them, meaning the Arab states, the Sunni Arab states, meaning Qatar, Saudi Arabia, some of them had said that if the United States is prepared to go do the whole thing the way we've done it previously in other places, Iraq, they'll carry the cost.
Color me not shocked.
So that's what this is all. This is all about oil, a pipeline. This isn't about John Kerry pretending to be upset that they're bombing hospitals or using chemical weapons, and that's why we got to go in there. It's all about oil. And yes. So Kerry reiterated to that offer that the Saudis and the Sunni Arab states had made to Representative Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, if that's how you say her name, quote, with respect to the Arab countries offering to bear the cost of an American invasion to topple Assad, the answer is profoundly yes. They have. The offer is on the table. That's what Kerry told somebody. John Kerry, Secretary of State. So in 2011, the U.S. joined France, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and England to form the Friends of Syria coalition. Boy, is that Orwellian.
That's a really creepy sounding thing, man. That sounds like the worst sewing circle ever.
In 2011, we founded the Friends of Syria coalition, which formally demanded the removal of Assad. The CIA then provided $6 million to Barata, a British TV channel, to produce pieces and treating Assad for propaganda. Saudi intelligence documents published by WikiLeaks show that by 2012, Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia were arming, training, and funding radical jihadist Sunni fighters from Syria, Iraq, and elsewhere to overthrow Assad. So that means all of our allies in the Mideast were funding the people we claim to be fighting. ISIS, cutting people's heads off, radical Islamic jihadists. Those people, the guy who's those people, our friends in the Mideast, are funding. In 2008, they said this. The long war. The long war to overthrow the uncooperative Bashar Assad was a feasible path to achieving the shared objective of completing the Qatar-Turkey gas link. So nobody really knows what's going on in Syria. I mean, people in the United States who are close readers of the newspapers in America, or they watch the news in America, because they don't tell you what's really going on in Syria, and they never have, and they never will. Okay, so they keep saying, the United States, we're trying to overthrow Assad. Do you know who we're working with to overthrow Assad? ISIS and Al-Qaeda. But they say, oh, no, we're working with moderate Sunni rebels. The moderates, not the ISIS, we're working with the moderates. Well, here is our good friend Ben Swan to tell us who are the moderates. So this is from International Business Times. In 2015, they said the moderate movement in Syria could be considered officially dead as of last week, when the last U.S.-backed rebel faction called Harakat Hezm disbanded. Its members joining extremist groups such as the Nusra Front, the Al-Qaeda offshoot in the country, and some of the men joined a group called the Levant Front, a coalition of rebel militias that also has ties to Al-Qaeda. So that was the International Business Times in 2015 saying there are no more. The last handful of moderate rebels are officially Al-Qaeda in Syria. So all the people we've been training and funding, and the Pentagon's been training some people, the CIA's been training other terrorists, not rebels, terrorists. And so just keep that in mind. These are not freedom fighters. Who's in Syria? Al-Qaeda and ISIS. That's who's trying to overthrow Assad at the behest of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, because they want to put a natural gas pipeline through there. Okay, so everybody knows. So let's listen to what Ben has to say. Ben Swan has to say now.
To Al-Qaeda. And again, that was 2015. And yet, through 2016, weapons and funding from the West continued. In September of this year, 2016, the U.S. delivered 3,000 tons of weapons and ammo to fighters in Syria, including rocket launchers and anti-tank guided weapon systems. So what you need to know. It is a fact that since 2012, those so-called moderate rebels in Syria have been absorbed into Al-Qaeda groups or pledged allegiance to ISIS. And for the past year, the moderates, they have been gone. So when media only calls these groups freedom fighters, and yet these fighters have pledged themselves to Al-Qaeda and to ISIS, then no, make no mistake, they are not looking to make Syria free. They are looking to enslave it, as they have in so many other places.
And it says the evacuation brokered by government ally Iran and rebel backer Qatar. Oh, the rebel backer? Why the F does Qatar want to overthrow Syria? Here's the pipeline that he's talking about, by the way. So look at this. So here's the pipeline starting at Qatar. So this is by the way, this is natural gas. Right. So Saudi Arabia and Iran, they have the largest natural gas deposit in the world. And so Qatar wants to take it through Jordan. See, we go Saudi Arabia, Jordan, through Syria, through Turkey. So they're on board. Jordan's on board. Turkey's on board. Guess who's not on board? Syria. Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, really? The Wahhabis, the people they care about people. They're upset that Assad's a butcher. Meanwhile, they're dropping cluster bombs on fishing villages in Yemen. Why does Qatar and Saudi Arabia have anything to do? Here's the Daily Mail. Innocent children lured to death with crisps. At least 80 children fleeing besieged Syrian towns are killed after approaching a suicide car bomb to receive snacks. So there was a suicide car bomb came by, had crackers, crisps. These kids are starving. Says, come get the crisps. So when enough kids came around them, they blew up the car. Who did that? The people we're funding and supporting. That's us. That'd be the United States.
We're going to turn now to that surprise mission to Syria for Senator John McCain. He secretly crossed the border into the war zone yesterday to meet with rebels trying to overthrow the Assad regime and build support for arming those fighters. ABC's John Carl has the details from Washington. John, this comes as Europe is lining up behind McCain's campaign for more military aid to the rebels.
That's right, George. The European Union has now lifted its arms embargo on Syria. That is the first step towards getting heavy European weapons to the Syrian rebels. McCain crossed over that border with Turkey in great secrecy. He met directly with the top Syrian rebels to make the point that they deserve all the support the United States can give. And George, this was with such secrecy that not even his daughter knew that he was going there.
That'd be Qatar. That'd be Saudi Arabia. That's who did that. And it's funny, the news reports, nobody's calling for a missile strike over this. Isn't that weird? Well, here's how CNN reported it.
Breaking news into CNN, 100 people have died in an attack in Syria. Syria's pro-regime state media says the deadly blast that hit a convoy of buses earlier today was actually disguised as a food truck. Most of those killed were being evacuated from pro-regime towns. Witnesses tell CNN that the evacuations have since resumed.
So they don't even tell you who did it. They don't even tell you to be outraged, did they? They even say to be upset. They didn't even say that we're calling for airstrikes to make up for this. You killed how many children? How many children? 80 kids on purpose? They lured them in and blew them up? The people working with the United States did that? Is that what happened?
Breaking news.
Here's another one. And so you heard they didn't refer to them as ISIS or Al-Qaeda or terrorists or butchers. Did they do that? It's weird they didn't do that, right, Ron? Isn't that weird they didn't do that? They didn't refer to them as butchers?
Nope, no reference to butcher.
My bill would put an end to this madness.
You recently introduced legislation called the Stop Arming Terrorists Act.
That being said, my understanding is you know how I feel about your stance on foreign policy. And when I hear the name Tulsi Gabbard, I think of an Assad apologist. I think of someone who comes back to the United States and is spouting propaganda from Syria. You have said that the Syrian President Assad is not the enemy of the United States, yet he's used chemical weapons against his own people 300 times. That was a red line with President Obama. That is not our enemy. 13 million Syrians have been displaced. So when you say regime change is hurtful for the country, but gassing children isn't more hurtful, it's hard for me to understand where you come from a humanitarian standpoint if you were to become president.
Well, you're putting words in my mouth that I've never said.
You did not say that Syrian President Assad is not the enemy of the United States. Say it now, clarify.
The issue here is how can we help alleviate the suffering of people?
Just really one moment. Is he an enemy of the United States?
An enemy of the United States is someone who threatens our safety and our security. There is no disputing the fact that Bashar al-Assad in Syria is a brutal dictator. There are other terrorist groups in Syria who have used similar chemical weapons and other weapons of terror against the people of Syria. This is an unfortunate thing that wrenches at every one of our hearts. This is not something I'm disputing, nor am I apologizing or defending these actions. My point is that the reality we are facing here is that since the United States started waging a covert regime change war in Syria, starting in 2011, the lives of the Syrian people have not been improved. Their well-being has not gotten to a better place. Their suffering has not decreased. It has increased.